shared it with some of my teammates as well as the organization and everyone else in Boston. You guys will have me back. I plan on re-signing here next year.
All the time. It's unfair to me because I have a focus to really help these guys grow as individuals and really help this team be successful. And when it starts getting out of hand, and people start getting attacked personally, and he said, she said, like that's so fifth grade and elementary. Like this industry is just so effed up. Like it's my decision at the end of the day. Who cares what says what's best for him? Like it doesn't matter. It's unwarranted commentary, and of course it's still going to continue throughout the season. I'm aware of that. I'm a professional at the end of the day. I'm not going to disrespect anybody, but like I said, it really comes down to what's best for me and my family. So.
Thanks, man.
Well. Just a mere 4.5 months after proclaiming his commitment to re-signing with the Boston Celtics, Kyrie Irving took a peculiar stance today, one day after the Knicks made their blockbuster trade yesterday, clearing all sorts of cap space. Before I get into what Kyrie Irving said today, what it means, the machinations, what it entails, so on and so forth, let's take a second to breathe here. I'm recording this at about 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're approximately 26 hours after the big news was announced that the Knicks have traded Kristaps Porzingis. And it's amazing when you talk to people about yesterday and how much of a shock it was to the system, how much of a just out of nowhere shot it was to the bowels, where you're sitting there at work, like me, many of you maybe got a text message, maybe spotted it on Twitter, that the Knicks representatives met with the front office. They had, this FaceTime where I guess Porzingis, his representative, expressed concern about the future direction of the team, his role, but assuring that he wants to be in this team, he wants to be on a winner in New York, and how it quickly went down a slippery slope with the Knicks being left with the impression that he no longer wanted to be there, and then boom, 10 minutes later, you have a blockbuster trade involving 7 players that would be consummated all within a span of 2 hours. So again, just to recap what we talked about yesterday, and I'm sure what you've all been discussing with your friends, this is not a deal that took place within that 2-hour vacuum. This, no doubt, had to have been an ongoing discussion for days, for weeks. I'm sure the Knicks made various phone calls, and many of the conversations involved Porzingis. What the surprising thing, however, is this. Going by that narrative, how come none of this was leaked? I mean, the NBA is such where, everyone's an insider now. Anyone who knows anything, who knows anyone, knows something or hears something or something gets leaked. You saw with how much, synchronization there was between all the beat writers yesterday as this information came out. This was rapid fire. What's surprising to me is that, as much as we rely on this narrative that this had to have been an ongoing conversation with the Knicks, with other teams, and I guess in particular with the Dallas Mavericks, is that how is none of this leaked? How is there were no morsels of information on Twitter that suggested that the Knicks were actively shopping Porzingis or were even dangling Porzingis in any sort of trade talk. So that to me might have been the most surprising thing of all. But nonetheless, it's amazing how, I guess, Knicks Nation is a day later. How the immediate reaction from the majority of people that I spoke to, of course, many, if not all, Knicks fans, they were beside themselves. They were pissed. They couldn't stomach the fact that the New York Knicks just traded their franchise cornerstone. How every promise that the New York Knicks had made to the fans, that every promise you had in your own head about where this team was going, was centered around Kristaps Porzingis. This team was going to build around Kristaps Porzingis, that the free agents that were going to be brought in, whoever they end up drafting with presumably a very high draft pick, all of that was to be part of an equation that centered around Kristaps Porzingis. And in one fell swoop, that was all gone. That whole vision down the drain. So the initial reaction was one of, what the hell just happened? I hate myself. I hate my life. I hate the fact that I was born or indoctrinated into being a Knicks fan. Those are the initial reactions. And then I think as the day progressed, as I'm sure many of you had several conversations about this topic, I think, and I'm not saying everybody listening to this podcast is still on board with the trade. Many of you are probably still thinking to yourself that the Knicks could have done better when you trade your franchise cornerstone player, that you should have gotten a bigger return than just cap space. And that's a fair argument. That's not one that's going to be decided until, again, as we've discussed, July or heading into July, when you figure all the dominoes are going to fall, all the back channel conversations are going to come to the forefront, and you're going to have a better idea as far as where Kevin Durant is leaning, as far as where Kyrie Irving is leaning. And that's the topic of this podcast, Kyrie Irving. I'm going to take you back to October when he made that proclamation. And right off the bat, again, keep in mind, put some perspective around this. Kyrie Irving was at a season ticket holder event, aka a pep rally. This was not some small little, conference room event. This was not one of those, like, for instance, like the New York Mets just had their conference with season ticket holders. That's in a more controlled setting. It's almost like a glorified presentation / Q&A session, right? That's a little bit more. You're not going to have players or team personnel say things for applause, right? You're not going to get somebody grabbing the microphone, saying something dramatic into the microphone, and the crowd's going to go nuts. This event took place at the Boston Garden, whatever is the TD Boston Garden. So, and there was a crowd there, right? So again, it's a pep rally. Pep rallies, whether they be for a team heading off to the Super Bowl, whether they be after a team has won something, or like in high school, right? The next, your pep rally is usually held on a Friday because the next day was your football team's big game against your local rival or whatever. The team captain or a key player of the team grabs a microphone and is trying to get the crowd hyped up. Anything they say is going to get everybody like, yeah, right. I mean, somebody grabs a microphone and the first question asks, how are y'all feeling today? You all go nuts, right? Who's going to come out to the game tomorrow? Yeah. Who thinks we're going to win this game tomorrow? All right. So, look, that was the kind of a setting where, again, I don't know what he's thinking. I don't know what his intentions are. And to be very honest with you, even despite what he said today, I still have no idea what he's thinking. That's the thing about the trade, where if you're against the trade of Porzingis, you could say that, look, the idea that you made this monumental trade, trading away your best young player in, 30 years, for the promise, for the possibility of the Knicks landing a prime free agent, or in the case of the Knicks, what they did, 2 prime free agents, it's kind of a risky, it's kind of a shaky proposition. Now, again, you could look into this deeper and think to yourself that the Knicks have to have some level of intelligence, some idea that, be it Kevin Durant, be it Kyrie Irving, or be it somebody else that may come along with the primary target of Kevin Durant, they've had to have some idea in order to make this kind of a move. Now, the corollary to that would be, well, even if that's not the case, you have to think long term. And if you, as the Knicks organization, look at Kristaps Porzingis and you say to yourself, all right, what are the facts? Yes, shown immense promise. He had a stretch last year when the Knicks were one of the most entertaining teams of in the entire NBA in their early stretch, where he was averaging video game numbers, and you literally said to yourself, a franchise star, all-star, perennial all-star, whatever you want to call it, whatever superlatives you want to use, is born, is flourishing right before our eyes. You saw a player go from, the promise of a talented young player into now one of the most dominant, I don't want to just say big men, but dominant players in the NBA. And that's what Porzingis displayed last year before he got hurt. But that is an important aspect of it, that he did get hurt, and that he is 7'3", coming back from a severe knee injury. Beyond that, this is somebody who has not been the exact picture of health. So when you as an NBA organization are planning, for the next 5 years, for the next whatever, and you're looking at what you're building around, if you have the slightest doubt that your star player is going to be what you project him to be talent-wise, that right there is a red flag. But that's not why they traded him. You then take it a step further and you say to yourself, all right, what do we feel as far as what our vision is and what his vision is for this team going forward? And if you believe the reports, if you believe that Porzingis, his representation, that through words and through actions over time made it clear to the Knicks that this picture, this equation that the Knicks are putting together is not something that they see themselves a part of. And I say them because if you follow the Knicks on a day-to-day basis, you know that it's not just Porzingis making the decisions. His brother, Giannis, is a very heavy influence in Porzingis' life. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, he's his older brother. He, too, played professional basketball. So this isn't something to the effect of, how dare he, this or that. But, again, believe what you want to believe. But the reality is that amongst, or what the Knicks are telling us, they were told through verbal cues, through, I guess, actions or what have you, that Kristaps Porzingis did not see himself as a Knick in the long run. So when you get that kind of a signal, coupled with the concerns you have about how he's going to come back after his injury, you then have to take a long look and say to yourself that in a year's time, the Knicks are going to have a major decision to make. As a matter of fact, at the end of this season, with the fact that Porzingis is set to become a restricted free agent, even then you have a major decision to make. And if you are getting the idea that Porzingis was going to test free agency, or that he wasn't fully committed to staying a New York Knick, that does two things. For one, you as the Knicks are saying to yourself, that's the guy that we're going to commit a supermax to, or a whatever $200 million chunk over the next 6 years. That's one thing. The money, the cap space that you were going to commit to that player who you don't know if he is 100% on board with what your franchise is doing and the direction in which you're heading. Here's the second part of it. And this is one where, again, it's funny how so many angles about any sort of sports story are uncovered with the more and more and more conversations that you have. And I didn't think about this. I heard about this. I can't remember where I heard this angle. It was this morning. And that is, if Porzingis is unsure of whether or not he wants to stay with this team, what cue is that sending to potential free agents or potential Knick free agent targets? Furthermore, if those free agent targets are talking to Porzingis and they're not getting a clear answer out of him as to whether or not he's going to be around or whether or not he even wants to be part of this team, that's a dangerous thing. Because if Porzingis is telling, let's just say for argument's sake, he's talking to Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is asking him, hey, KP, listen, if I'm coming, I need to know whether or not you're going to be there or not. And if KP's like, nah, I'm not really sure, Durant's going to ask, why are you not sure? What is the deal? What is the issue? What are the problems? What do I need to know before I make this, big next decision about which team I select in free agency. And if Porzingis is saying less than glowing things about the Knicks, that's a dangerous thing. That's the kind of thing that not only, obviously will hinder the Knicks, or rather compromise their willingness to sign Porzingis to that kind of a long-term deal, if he's 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that's poisoning the water for other free agent targets. So if the face of your franchise is not all in, that does not paint the most glowing picture for the organization that a free agent is going to be thinking to themselves, that's the place I want to go to. San Antonio, for instance, for the longest time, it was a simple matter. They didn't need the superstar, right? Because for many years it was, all right, you have the triumvirate of Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. There's a steady core there, but you have, a steady presence at the head coach position. You have a steady presence in the front office. I just need to show up there and bring my talents, and we're going to be fine. I don't have to think about anything else. I don't have to worry about anything else. And really for many years, it was the same thing in Dallas, right? I mean, you look at Rick Carlisle, who still is the head coach, but Dallas is just that model of consistency, model of, structure, right? That's what players crave. They want structure. Again, however you want to shape the narrative as far as why, LeBron and Bosh joined Wade in Miami, and people want to say, well, a lot of it has to do with, Pat Riley and the kind of culture that he created there. Look, a lot of that discussion took place way before the decision, and we know that all these conversations were predetermined. But you will have to admit that the structure that Pat Riley created in Miami, that's a structure of stability. There's a reason why that franchise has been relevant for all those years, even without LeBron. I mean, they won a title before him with Dwayne Wade. So, again, there is something to be said about a model of consistency, a model of a structure of consistency, where if a player is choosing a team, he wants to know, am I going to be in a drama-free environment? And that's a reason why Kevin Durant might not want to play with LeBron James, because he's probably looking at LA and saying to himself, all right, well, LeBron went to Miami, LeBron went to Cleveland, and, he was a de facto GM. Whichever player he wanted to bring in, they brought in. If he didn't want a player there, he was gone. If he didn't want a coach there, he too was gone. And Durant is sitting there looking at that situation and thinking to himself, like, do I really want to be a part of that? Where, okay, LeBron is running the show, but then if the team wins, it's LeBron's win, right? It's LeBron and his, chase with Michael Jordan for how many titles or what have you. But if we lose, it's everybody else, right? And then it's going to be, well, Kevin Durant joined LeBron in Los Angeles and they didn't win, so it's got to be Kevin Durant. It's got to be all him, right? So, let's go back to Kyrie Irving, because so Kyrie Irving sort of really opened up a conversation talking point today when you go from basically telling a fan base, hey guys, look, I am coming back, yay, right? I mean, you remember Paul George, but Paul George did it after the season, before free agency reopened. And when it was pretty much 100% assumed he was going to Los Angeles, he was going to play on the Lakers, and whatever it was, maybe he just enjoyed playing with Russell Westbrook, maybe he just fell in love with the city of Oklahoma City. He decided he wanted to stay. He made that announcement and he said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying. Now that was after the season, that was right before the stroke of free agency. This is a different situation because it was before the season that Kyrie Irving stood before the Boston fan base and said what he said. Now, I tweeted back then that, put things in perspective, that this was a pep rally and you want to take it with a slight grain of salt. But for what it's worth, if you look at the amount of cap space, $74 million plus, that the Knicks are going to have this offseason, that means one thing. That if two max free agent players want to go somewhere, New York is their best bet. for accommodating their contracts and then accommodating, basically, I guess the secondary players that they're going to be able to get in free agency. The Knicks have by far the most cap space heading into this year's offseason, and that's a big thing. So we'll see what happens as far as, what unfolds over the next few weeks, next few months, because look, you do have to be a little cautious, when it comes to Kyrie Irving, because as far as a talent, as far as a point guard, I mean, he's up there amongst the very best in the NBA. He is in that elite class. The biggest concern that you have are twofold. One, his injury history. Kyrie Irving is seemingly always hurt, which is a major, major issue, and one that is not to be taken lightly or granted or what have you. The other issue is this: Kyrie hasn't done as a leading man. Now, granted, if you want to look at the first tour of his pre-LeBron Cleveland years, I mean, he was fresh into the league, and you really can't fault him for the team being what they were or whatever. And then obviously LeBron joined and he became, Robin to LeBron's Batman. But you look at this Boston Celtics team, and pound for pound, you can argue that this team is as talented or almost as talented as the team that he won the championship with, whether the Cleveland team that he won the championship with. Because when you take him off the roster, obviously it was LeBron, it was Kevin Love, and it was essentially what you have this year with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They go from last year Eastern Conference champions to this year one tick above where the Knicks are at, essentially at the bottom of the NBA. So obviously, I mean, it goes without saying, you see what kind of a resounding impact LeBron had on that team, on that roster. But, you are 2-3 years removed from the, Kyrie, LeBron, Kevin Love era with Cleveland. And you saw how that elevated the standard and the quality of the rest of that roster. But you look at this Boston roster, and I mean, you have the likes of Tatum, of Hayward, of Brown. I mean, that is a talented team, and they're young. I mean, so there isn't any, notable weaknesses where you could point to and say, all right, well, it's a good roster, but they're on, the wrong side of 30. It's a bit of an older roster, this, that, or the other. They are the modern prototype of the NBA. They're young, they're athletic, they're versatile. And Kyrie Irving is serving as the lead man on that team. So really, this is that, I guess, audition showcase for Kyrie to be the leading man. Reportedly, that's what he wanted when he left Cleveland, or when he was even in Cleveland. He wanted to be out. He wanted to be on a team where he could be the leading man, and that's essentially what he's getting right now. I don't know if Kyrie is better as, or rather, I'll rephrase. I would go as far as to say that I would prefer that if Kyrie Irving comes to New York, for him to be the Robin to Kevin Durant's Batman. I'll take it a step further, that if Kevin Durant does not come to the Knicks, I would be very wary of the Knicks committing to Kyrie Irving. And the reason I say that is because I don't know if he profiles as that leading man. And, when you look at some of the comments that he's made this year, recently, over the last few weeks, and then earlier today, I don't know if that's befitting of a leader of a team that has a lot of youth. And that scares me, because you look at Boston, and really what is the biggest notable difference, from last year to this year? Gordon Hayward, right? You have Gordon Hayward, and obviously now you have a healthy Kyrie Irving, and you're starting to hear some chatter. You're starting to hear, you heard it from the Golden State Warriors players, you're hearing, various reports that players around the league look at Boston and say, oh, Gordon Hayward's holding them back. If you're Kyrie Irving, you get out in front of that. If you're going to be a leader of a young team, a leader of a team that, despite their place in the standings right now, many look at as a team that's going to be in contention for the Eastern Conference title and a shot at the NBA Finals, and to take a step further, a team that many think have as good a chance to dethrone the Golden State Warriors as any in the NBA, you need to be out in front of that. You need to be able to come out and say, look, Gordon Hayward, he's part of the winning equation here, not the other way around. That when we went out and got Gordon Hayward, that added to the quality of this team. That added, our shot at as an NBA title contender. I would have liked to see that. For him to make subtle remarks, essentially calling out the younger players in this team, that's unbecoming of a leader. And that's not the kind of thing that's going to work on a team like the Knicks, presuming that he does come here if he is the lead guy. When you have a team, let's say he comes to the Knicks, Kevin Knox is going to be in his second year, Frank Ntilikina is going to be in his third year, presuming that they don't trade him. Alonzo Trier, Mitchell Robinson, second-year players, they're very impressionable. They're very, very, impressionable. They're going to be looking at the lead guy, and they're going to be following his lead. It's funny because a lot of people have been saying this about, and I know Boomer Esiason said this on the morning show earlier today, essentially blaming Carmelo Anthony for the direction that Kristaps Porzingis took. Essentially that Porzingis came into the league young, impressionable, and took the lead of Carmelo Anthony, and somehow that was a bad thing. Somehow he influenced him in a negative way, and that all of this led to this debacle that took place yesterday. It's an unfair remark, in my opinion. By the way, had they waited about 10 days or rather, if Carmelo came to a game 10 days after he did, right, when he got that rousing ovation, can you imagine how much louder that ovation will be now that Knicks fans are basically now falling back in love with Carmelo Anthony as the greatest Knick of the last 15 years, and, when he left, forget Melo, it's all about KP, and now that KP leaves, oh my God, Melo, we miss you. But, going back to the point, again, this is all under the presumption that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are having these discussions, and the conversation is along the lines of, hey, look, if you're in, let's go to New York together. It's essentially going to be our franchise, and we're going to get to mold and shape it the way that we please. That under those circumstances, yeah, I'm okay with it, because again, keep in mind, Kyrie Irving has an injury history. So if you're bringing him in as your number 2, I think that is a lot more digestible than him coming in as your number 1. And now the spotlight is going to be on the magnifying glass is going to be on him as a leader. It's going to be on him as the guy down the stretch in the clutch, so on and so forth. And then the magnifying glass is also going to be on him. The first time he twists his ankle or, comes down hard and is gingerly walking around, you're going to hold your breath. As a number 2 guy, you're a little bit more, easily accepting of the situation. Whatever they, and by they I mean Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, decide to do, I don't even know if they know what it is that they want to do. Because this all seems to change so rapidly, and, well, player X is thinking this now, or report this player's preference is to go here or do this or do that. And, in light of yesterday with Porzingis, the news coming out that I guess his representation made it clear to the Knicks that he, wished to be traded, and the Knicks having to act proactively in a situation where they felt like, okay, well, why keep someone who's unhappy and be put in a position where we could lose him for nothing come next year? What if you have teams now start to look at their own locker rooms and be like, wait a second, hey, you, star player, are you happy here? Are you going to be with us, or are you going to leave us high and dry? So look, there are going to be a lot of trade whispers over the next few days, over the next, up until the trade deadline. And then after that, you're going to have all sorts of rumors. This free agent likes this free agent has this preference, and so on and so forth, heard from so on and so forth that this player has, the desire to go to this team with that player, and, it's going to be nonstop. But that's what makes this so entertaining. I mean, look at it. We're 2 days away from the Super Bowl. And what are we all talking about? And what are, so many of the national media outlets talking about? I mean, this Kristaps Porzingis blockbuster chewed so hard into what is the coronation of the NFL season, into the crown jewel moment of the NBA season. And, again, it just goes to show what kind of an impact NBA, I don't want to say offseason, but the free agency talk, trade talk, how much that moves the needle, because, you're talking about a finite number of players that move the needle one way or the other, right? There are certain players where if they're mentioned to be on the move, that's going to halt the news cycle and it's going to steer it in that direction. That's the power that these players have now in the NBA. So, but again, that's the recap. Kyrie Irving, October, telling Boston Celtics fans, season ticket holders that, look, my intention is to re-sign here. And then earlier today, I don't owe bleep to anyone, and then I'm going to figure it out, and I don't know an explanation, so on and so forth. But that, he kind of slyly added in there that Boston is in the lead for my services. So not exactly the strongest endorsement or strongest commitment to re-sign with Boston, but whatever plays out, we will see. We'll see, how this starts to affect the talk surrounding Anthony Davis, and we'll see how it affects the plans for the New Orleans Pelicans, see what they want to do now in light of what happened earlier today. Nick FM, nickfm.com. More podcasts coming soon on this channel. If you like what you heard, please subscribe below, like this video. More to come.